Welcome, everyone. We're here with Operation Parent and Dr. Collier. We couldn't be more excited that you're spending the afternoon with us. Here's what you can expect for today's webinar. We have a 90-minute session planned. First, our expert, Dr. Collier, will share her insights, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. You can submit your questions at any time using the chat. Only Amanda and I are going to be able to see your questions, so don't worry, they are very private. Handouts and slides are available right now in the pop-up window and on our website. We are aware that the handout that we sent out earlier, the link was not working, but those are corrected. So if you go back in to your email or download from here, you will have access to those handouts and follow along with us. After the webinar, you're going to receive a couple of emails. One will include your certificate of attendance and have the recording link to the survey. We appreciate you taking a couple minutes to give us your honest feedback about your experience today and help us continue to grow the webinar program. The recording and all the resources will remain available on our website. Our webinars are offered with Spanish translations. Here is how it works. The slides that you see now are available in the pop-up window, and live captions are offered in both English and Spanish during the session. After the webinar, a recording with Spanish translations will be sent in a follow-up email within 8 hours and also be posted in the webinar library on our website tomorrow. So please check that out. Operation Parent is a nonprofit organization with a very simple mission: empowering parents and caregivers to have casual, courageous conversations with their children. That mission is why we offer these webinars, to provide practical tools, expert guidance, and support so families can navigate life challenges with confidence. We invite you to use the pop-up link to register for our next webinars. On March 31st, Dr. Michael Robb from Common Sense Media will be talking about how AI and kids and how kids are using it, and also, most importantly, how to keep them safe. In April and May, we'll have a two-part series on preventing first-time use. You can register for both here with the pop-up. Today, we're with Dr. Collier, and we're talking about the state of modern youth, navigating screens, substances, and pressures. So today, we're going to spend some time talking about and hear modern youth perspectives about high-risk behavior directly from teens themselves. We're going to understand at the end of this presentation the implications on brain development, and we're going to learn what youth would like adults to do. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome back our longtime friend, Dr. Crystal Collier. She's an author, a therapist, and an educator whose clinical work focuses on adolescents and adults struggling with mental illnesses, behavior problems, and substance use disorders. Dr. Collier has developed a comprehensive prevention model, which teaches the neurodevelopmental effects of risky behavior to children, teens, teachers, and parents. Today, she's sharing what teens are facing in their own words and how parents can meet their youth where they are at with support and validation. We are so thrilled to welcome you back, Dr. Collier. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Michelle and Amanda. I love you guys. Operation Parent has a very warm place in my heart. And so this presentation to me is so cool because my first book, The Neuro Whereabouts Guide, which is a neurodevelopmental guide for parents that lists 18 different high-risk behavior and how they affect neurodevelopment. I had one of my girlfriends, her kiddo read it. 11, 12-year-old girl read the parent guide and she was like, I love this, but I want one for myself. So that really inspired me to start finding interns who wanted to help me create a book that was written by teens for teens. So The teen guide was published in December. Your Moves Matter, the Teens Playbook for Smart Choices and Big Wins is available. And we're going to give you guys a few of these copies today toward the end. Now, many of you who have seen me present before know that I love to study about brain development, and specifically our adult brain, the prefrontal cortex or the frontal lobes. And I have looked at executive functioning skills and how they grow and develop. So these on the left are the lower level skills, on the right, the higher level skills. These are the skills that we use, our basic thinking, feeling, doing skills every single day, but they all grow based upon the brain's rule, use it or lose it. So when I learned this, I thought, oh my gosh, okay, every single parent and kid needs to understand how their brain is growing these executive functioning skills and literally what is growing. And that is when I saw these pictures of neurons growing. This particular slide is babies' neurons, infant neurons growing all the way up to age 2. And so you see that we grow these beautiful connectors that are called dendrites, but all of those grow based upon the brain's rule, use it or lose it. And this is why I think all of our mantras should be dendrites, dendrites, dendrites. I have heard that is Operation Parent's official motto now, and especially in the office. But I always think about when parents or caregivers or teachers see my presentation, I always imagine that they go back and look at their kids and their students in very new ways. Like, okay, how can they use those executive functioning skills to continue growing those dendrites? And when I was looking at the frontal lobe, I did a deep dive a few years ago about our neurodevelopment and how the size of our brain has been growing and growing, growing. And about 2 million years ago, there was this really cool upswing in the size of our brain. And it had to do with a behavior that we were engaging in. When we started cooking, our brains just exploded with amazing growth. And think about all the things that you're using, the skills that you would be using to cook and to come together to cook. And it just is such a beautiful kind of evolution when we think about our brain. But the past 50,000 years, we've actually seen a decrease in total brain size, and the frontal lobe has really stalled out in growth. And when I think about, okay, why is that? There's a lot of different theories. And one of them is that we're not using it like we used to. Some of the theorists think that our population's gotten so big that we just don't need to do as much as we used to. And so we're literally kind of deprived of senses. And this is a beautiful study or a picture that shows the activity in the brain of somebody who's very stimulated and somebody who does not have as much stimulation. Now, when we think about, okay, how is the frontal lobe hurt? How does it get damaged? There are a couple ways that we have figured this out. One of them is through this gentleman, Phineas Gage, who lived quite a long time ago. And he used to work on the railroad and had an injury. He had this rod that during an explosion actually punctured his frontal lobe and came out of his mouth. So we have these amazing studies that show what happened to Phineas. He had decreased attention. His working memory suffered. He kept doing these perseverative errors. He would get stuck in this loop and do the same thing over and over again and not learn from his mistakes. He had a decrease in like being appropriate in public, an increase in social impropriety. So he turned out to be quite the character, which was not who he was before the accident. He had distortions of self. He had detachment of reality, lack of cognitive flexibility. He couldn't switch tasks very easily. His moral judgment went down the toilet, and his abstract reasoning really decreased. He also showed inabilities to plan or maintain plans and a big, huge lack of motivation. Now, some of you guys may be thinking about your teenagers as I am reading this list, because we're seeing a lot of these issues happening in modern youth today. The other way that we know that our frontal lobe gets to or becomes damaged is through substance use or the use of risky behavior. And that's literally because of that sensory deprivation. We know that when we're engaging in addictive substance use or behaviors, our frontal lobe literally downregulates. And it takes a while for that regulation, that blood flow and electrical activity to return to that part of the brain once we stop engaging in that behavior. So that leads us to talking about, okay, what are we seeing in youth today? Now, I'm a therapist. I see about 15, 20 clients a week. So I feel like I get a really good idea of what's happening out there, but it's just my small sliver of the world. So I really wanted to ask teenagers and college age students what they thought. So I went out to a lot of the kids that helped me write the book, Your Moves Matter. And all these themes started to come up when I was asking them some questions. So I literally asked them just a few open-ended questions, and then they sent me their videos with the answers. So we're going to hear from them today. And these are the themes that popped up. I was really surprised by this first theme because I knew that screens and technology were such a huge issue for us today. And if you've read Anxious Generation or seen Children and Screens webinars, you'll hear about a lot of that research. But when I heard from the youth, it really brought home what this particular theme meant for kids. So I'll stop here and let Amanda play the tape through.
I think high-risk behaviors like technology overuse is very prevalent. I've met people that have spent over 15 hours on their phone daily, which is just insane, right? And I think that has a lot to do with like using technology as means to escape these things that they're so afraid of.
Something that tops the cake overall is technology addiction, right? This could be on your phone, video games, on your computer, online shopping in class, social media, pornography addictions, whatever it is, it all has to do with your device, right?
So today's generation has grown up with social media and constant digital exposure. So mistakes, conflict, embarrassing moments, whatever, it's recorded and it's shared, and everyone knows everything. And there's ever rarely a true break from social media because it's something that's around the clock. It never stops. In previous generations, I think that after a day of school or leaving school, it meant kind of disconnecting from the outside world. But now you come home and there's notifications, there's messages, there's constant online activity, and it's just a cycle that never stops. And so this can feel overwhelming, and it can feel, huge at times because you're just constantly being exposed to other people's lives, and it's just a lot.
In this day and age, it is nearly impossible that you are not going to be exposed to sexually graphic material. It is everywhere. It's on every streaming platform and every show that we watch. Friends and peers talk about it in school, on the playground, at lunch. No matter the age, it shows up in so many different forms. Not like when Playboy magazine was the #1 way to access pornographic material, where it's as simple as I don't send my kid to a friend's house where it's not readily available, because pornography is always available with the touch.
Whew. Okay. This is a big deal. I really did not realize the extent of it. When I listened to their tapes, I thought about how much email anxiety I have as an adult, and, going on vacation and the stress of keeping track of all those things and that's constantly coming in. It just really did not occur to me that kids are living under the same stress. And how is that affecting them? So when we take a look at average recreational screen time, so this is not academic, this is recreational. We see a huge increase when we look at age 13 up to 16, 18. This is the amount of hours of recreational screen time that they're I'm utilizing today. I learned at the International Congress of Children and Screens that about 80% of 4-year-olds have a tablet today or have access to a tablet. The genie is definitely out of the bottle. We're not going backwards, but we're starting to see that the younger we are exposed to screens, the greater extent of damage that it is having on our skills acquisition. If we don't talk, if we don't listen, use it or lose it is the brain's rule. We're not growing these skills. I'm seeing a big issue in cutoffs, people cutting people off of friendships, not growing conflict management skills, not learning how to deal with life on life's terms. And so the rising adolescent tech addiction is massive. If we look at back in the year 2000, we're looking at about 3% of the population that actually met criteria for it. And now we're well up into 18th percentile. You guys, this is phenomenal because when you look at the rates of alcoholism, about 16% of the population has that. When we look at rates of cannabis addiction, we're looking at anywhere between 9% and up to 25%. So this is rivaling that of substance use. Now, when we think about the symptoms, the criteria, we have some symptoms that we can look at from the DSM, but a lot of it has not been studied longitudinally long enough for many of these things to make it into our book yet. But we do know from a lot of experts in the country that PIMU, problematic interactive media use, has some very similar symptoms that other substance use addictions have. So it's important to remember that if you or your child or somebody you love has one or two of these symptoms, you should definitely make a change in your screen time guidelines. If somebody has 3 to 6 of these symptoms, you actually may need some help from a clinician that can help you figure out how to create a behavior modification program. And if you have 7 or more, you may need a treatment episode to diagnose, treat, or offer extended aftercare to the person who's suffering with this issue. Now, one of the things that we see happening because of too much screen time is that our brain is constantly on and firing. The nickname that this has been given is popcorn brain, but I wanted to show you guys the 5 different brain waves that our brain is capable of making. Now, when we're on and awake during the day and we're active, you can see these amazing firings that are happening in the brain. And then, of course, as we get relaxed and sleepy, we have slower, bigger, puffier waves. But with kids and adults staying on screens for longer and longer and longer, you are using your beta or gamma rays to do as if we're an alien. You're using your beta and gamma brain waves actually longer. And so that is eating into the time that your brain needs to start slowing down and relaxing and going into deep sleep, which is where we do 2 things. We do our physical body reparations and we also emotionally repair. We literally process things in our deep sleep so that we're prepared and ready for the next day. But our brain is on and firing way too much. And for kids, we see this really interfering with their sleep. They're not getting as much sleep. They're spending 3 hours longer to finish homework than they used to. Okay, let's go on to theme number 2. So when asked about the youth, the risks for, or like how the effects of high risk behavior, here's theme number 2. Amanda, take it away.
When I hear the question, what are youth struggling with most today, I immediately think of the problem in our society of social media and technology and figuring out how to make real legitimate connections and friendships while also having all of the external pressure of social media, which offers us the chance to interact with people through streaks on Snapchat and like counts and comments on Instagram, but never really form true friendship and knowing how to act in certain social situations with the pressure of when do I introduce myself, or when I'm standing in line at a coffee shop, do I say hi? Do I stare at my phone? all of the social media and technology makes it extremely difficult for kids my age to form real connections without having so much pressure from the digital world.
Or even just talking to people becomes a little bit harder because you are so connected to screens. You'd almost rather be with, your screens. Yeah, the more time on screens, the less time interacting with family and friends, especially parents, who you need to have a good connection with. And then thus they are unable to fully develop their social skills and may find it hard to connect with others, both in the future and in the present. And as for their mood, it most assuredly affects their mood, as the more time you spend, away from the world, looking down at your phone, it actually causes more aggressive behaviors, and it can make you less likely to want to hang out with others.
I think young people are struggling the most today with, honestly, the acceleration and the competitiveness of higher education and academics. I think it's become a lot more necessary, in a sense, for kids to run themselves dry to get into the right school, get into the right grad school, get into the right high school, etc. Where I feel like in generations before us, it really wasn't as competitive, nor was it as serious. It was more just, you go to school, you get an education, you get a job. Now it's, you go to high school, you need internships, you need volunteer work, you go to college, you need clubs, you need research, you need everything. Then you go to grad school, and it's just, I feel like it's just became a lot more competitive and a lot more stress evoking on my generation, especially, and younger generations to follow. I think that it's, honestly, you can look at it as a good thing, as our society and our generation and future generations are pushing themselves and wanting to be the best they can be, to where they hold themselves to a higher standard than previous generations. But I do think it's important to still remember that balance. And yes, it is important to work really hard and make good grades and be the best you can be, but it is also important to socialize, have a social life, have friends.
I think I see that young people are struggling with the most is, I think generally self-esteem and fitting in. I think a lot of times, especially with the rise of technology, and like this digital age, it's sometimes hard for teens to feel like they belong in a certain space or in a certain area.
Whew. So when I thought about this theme, belonging and connection, I was seeing Emily, in line at a coffee shop, and what do I say hello, or do I just look at my phone? And I remember when that was not an option for me. And so I either just stood there awkwardly, or I said hello or flirted, or, any of the number of things that we might do without the obstacle there. And so when I think about this particular theme, we fub each other all day long on our phones, and some of us are very apologetic about it, and some of us are not. But it is the number one complaint that I hear from kids, is that when my dad comes home, he gets on the phone. He's on the phone during dinner. And then he wants me to get off of it. My mom comes straight home, gets on her laptop. The feeling of disconnection in families today, or maybe not even eating family meals anymore because everybody's on a device, or when you're watching TV, everyone's also dually on a device doing something else while switch tasking. So the idea that, this is, whatever's on the screen is more important than you, starts to take root in a child as they're growing their attachment to their caregivers. And then, of course, when you don't use your communication skills, when you don't use your listening skills, when you don't use your attachment and belonging skills, you lose those too. So we're seeing a huge shift. Please remember, if we do a graph from birth to death, and we look at when peers are the most important and when we have the most friends, you're going to see a peak in middle school, and then it goes down from there. But as you can see by this chart, the blue line shows you 15 to 24-year-old friends. Today, it is now that commensurate to adults. Now, you can see that all of us are seeing a decrease in our friendships. Everybody is. But for kids, it is so deleterious. Because in middle school, we have to have all those friend dramas and those conflicts that can be very irrational at times, but that teaches us how to have conflict and connection as adults. And if that's not happening when it should, then what is happening? So when we think about how we belong and connect, having empathy for someone else is one of the major higher level executive functioning skills. And of course, this is not just emotional empathy, but cognitive empathy, the ability to step inside someone else's shoes and imagine what they're thinking and feeling allows us to change our behavior so that we're more forgiving, connected, and willing to go through awkward, tough conflict. But we see a decrease in empathy in our culture today. And this is just one study that illustrates it, that was done on young people who played a first-person shooter, or what we would call a murder training game. You can see that the kids who did not play show activity in the frontal lobe on their empathy questions, but our gamers show a statistically significant drop in the amount of activity. And these kids will say things like, I can't show empathy. I'm killing people in this game. I've got to dumb that down. The good news is that this particular study, they went back after the kids stopped playing the game and they returned to that beautiful high level of functioning in the frontal lobe on their empathy questions. But think about kids who've been playing video games from 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up until the age of 25, when those higher level executive functioning skills are supposed to be coming online. They are all governed by the use it or lose it principle. So we see a lot of kids and even adults today that don't really show or are demonstrating empathy like they used to. Okay, so our third theme, what are the effects of behavior in modern youth? Amanda, take this one away.
Throughout high school, there's a constant pressure to succeed both academically and socially. So in terms of academics, getting into competitive colleges, participating in extracurriculars, having leadership roles, but also being able to maintain a social life. So having friendships, having relationships, and just having that balance overall. These expectations are honestly higher than they've ever been, and they continue to increase year by year. And so many students may feel like they're constantly being evaluated, whether this is by their peers, by friends, family, teachers, colleges, whoever. And social media further amplifies that pressure. So young people are exposed to carefully curated versions of others' lives. So their accomplishments, their achievements, lifestyle, friends, relationships, appearance, whatever it may be, even when we kind of know that posts are filtered and edited to fit what people want others to see. Comparison happens regardless, and so real life gets compared to what people see on someone's highlight reels, and this can damage self-confidence, self-worth.
Social media sets high, often unachievable goals for appearance, physique, or popularity, which hurts teens' self-worth.
Additionally, it creates a lot of body issues, body image issues for a lot of young teen girls.
When you see all these people doing these things online, whatever, you kind of feel like you want to be there, you want to be doing these things, and it kind of like makes you feel like you don't belong. So with like social media, I think social comparison is a big thing. I've seen like a lot of my friends like compare themselves to these models online or with these influencers and have all these ideas, and I think while it's good to be able to see the world and to see what it is, I think at the same time, it kind of limits yourself because you're always trying to compare yourself and you're trying to be better and you're not grateful for what you have. So I think that's what contributes a lot to youth poor mental health. It's that idea that you're always trying to reach this level of perfection that isn't realistic.
That is not really attainable. So when I think about this particular theme, social comparison, I think about what teens are going through as they are moving through middle school and early high school. This is when we see adolescent egocentrism at its height. Now, it's important to remember that adolescents are not egocentric on purpose. This is a normal neurowhereabouts stage. And the idea of neurowhereabouts is knowing where your child's brain development is, what is going through, what it's capable of, and what it's not. And this is a really important stage for youth to go through. When you are so concerned and overly concerned about your own thoughts and feelings because you're trying to figure out who you are, what your role in social worlds are. And so this makes you really hyper aware of what you're thinking, feeling, and doing. And that's when the phenomenon known as imaginary audience comes into play. And this is when we will believe that everybody's looking at us all the time. I remember I could not walk by a mirror or a window that reflected my face or hair. I could not stop. Like, I had to stop and look. And now today I could go all day with, spinach in my teeth and not know or really even care. But when we are developing our social identity, these things are huge on the importance scale. This is also when we see personal fables start to emerge. And this is the belief that we're special and unique and we're vulnerable. Oh, that won't happen to me. These are all normal things that our brain is supposed to go through as we emerge into young adulthood. And we start to develop a much more person-centered view that is not us in the middle of that. We start to be able to take perspective and have empathy and figure out, where do I fit in these social circles? But think about this happening with social media constantly feeding you pictures. Now, I remember growing up in the 80s and seeing billboards that were airbrushed, and we started having conversations about how this affected us. But that was a billboard. Now it's constant. A constant feed of these images. Kids are stressed, and then they're seeing things that glamorize high-risk behavior, that are angry, that kids who feel like they are not living up to standards and they won't fit in or find a mate. It's a constant barrage of these images that are socially comparing them to unrealistic images online. And then, of course, we have tech companies who are keeping us plugged in all the time. When the amount of likes that you have equals your self-esteem, the depth and value of who you are as a person and what your relationship is really suffers. And so we see kids that see these idealized social media feeds, and it's constantly feeding their brain. And then they're always upward comparing. Like, I don't live up. You're always in a one down position, which causes negative self-evaluation. And that has a huge emotional impact on our kids. And then they have an increased vulnerability in their use and might doom scroll and continue looking at these in a way to analyze themselves because they don't have a healthy social group that can help them bounce back and cope from that. So then we see body dissatisfaction rates skyrocketing. So many kids today use social media as a way to look cool and curate their images. And so that's how identity development is portrayed. It's online in a very curated way. Now, this is taking a big toll, as you heard the young people say, especially on our girls whose self-esteem is lower than we've seen it in many, many years. Before you develop the ability to think abstractly about your identity, you've actually concretely compared yourself to millions of other images online and come up short. We also understand that this is having a big effect on our accessibility. So let's hear the next theme. Amanda?
It's also desensitizing the really big issue that, violence from video games has caused, or, desensitization to violence overall just from seeing it constantly in the media, or, all of these different aspects have led to a desensitization of our youth. And I think that we really need to emphasize how it's not normal to see violence. It's not normal to see pornography everywhere or OnlyFans or whatever. It's not normal to not be able to hold conversations with people because, you know, you've only been texting on the phone for months, you know.
It limits the productiveness and, you know, overall potential of teens. Simply put, the more time that they spend on their phones, the harder it is to complete real world tasks, whether that be, you know, homework or studying or even just reading or even just talking to people.
I think pornography is affecting young people today in a multitude of different ways. I think the biggest way and probably the most impactful way is how kids are viewing sex and how the violence and the aggression from pornography is showing up in relationships, because that is what kids think sex is supposed to look like.
So she goes on to talk more about what kids are seeing and how it desensitizes our ideas about what intimacy is. But this desensitization has a unique effect on how motivated we are. If we think this is the way, then we don't really feel motivation to do something different. So when we look at things like pornography and access to it and use of it, anywhere from 75% of youth are exposed, half of them by the age of 13 today, and about 10 to 20% of youth are daily users. About a third of youth say that it's their primary source of sex education, but admit that it's not a good one. So when I am working with families and parents whose kids have negative behaviors or emotions due to pornography use, I talk to parents a lot about, okay, how are you teaching your kids about sex? How are they learning it? And I've heard from a lot of parents who say, you know, I had the sex talk, you know, when we talked about babies, but that was it. Really, kids have a dearth of information about sex education. And so I really like organizations like Culture Reframed that are teaching kids, okay, not only what should intimacy look like, what is healthy intimacy, but what does your sexual identity look like and mean? Helping kids find out what that is really important so they can feel really confident about themselves in developing intimate relationships. We also see that this constant access to tech is desensitizing our attention span. It is literally lower than it ever has been. There's all these jokes out there that say our attention span is lower than a goldfish now. And, you know, we're looking at just a few seconds of being able to pay attention to things. And it's primarily caused by switch tasking, switching from one screen to the next to the next. So one of the things you guys can do is to not do double time screens. Like when you're watching TV, just let your brain rest. Don't be on your phone or laptop doing something else at the same time. But our brains have become desensitized to sensory stimuli. So we want more and more and more, and find it difficult to just sit still and watch for a while. So that is leading to our kids having problems imagining, daydreaming, and coming up with novel solutions. Your brain literally needs to rest and roam. Brainstorm. That's what that means, is thinking of all kinds of ideas, good, bad, ugly. We're not doing that because we have a constant stream of digital input coming in all day long. So we don't rest. Our glucose gets, completely used up, and then we're done for the day. And we're just not showing initiative like we used to. This is really having a negative effect on learning. A lot of the studies show that kids learn. One particular study showed a 9-minute loss of learning with every distraction in class. And this is why I'm so happy to see that many states are starting to ban cell phones in schools. But we have a lot of kids who've really grown accustomed to having their phones and are now learning how to cope without them. But I hope to see a swing to the other end of the continuum for motivation, because When we look at the research on youth motivation today, we see that a majority of kids are falling in one of two categories, either being amotivated, having no motivation, or being only externally motivated. So when we have this constant barrage of screens coming in, especially from gamified software, we are literally creating long networks of neurons for chasing carrots, rewards, points, leaderboards. All of this gamification is creating long networks of dendrites and cells for being externally motivated. And when we don't have intrinsic motivation, when we don't learn because we just love to learn or we want to get good at something, then we find a loss of meaning in life. Like, well, what is the purpose if I can't do something that I love, or if I don't even know what I love to do? So we're seeing an increase in young people finding life a little bit more meaningless than it used to. And that has a really negative effect on our mood. Okay, let's go for the next theme. Amanda?
Accessibility of always being able to access pornography and the toll that can take on your life and your real world relationships when you're always glued in to this pornography website that gives you an extreme dopamine rush. It really, really allows for young kids to get addicted because it doesn't matter if parents are monitoring, it's always available and accessible for us.
I think gambling has appeared in a kind of, it also looks very different online. There's a lot of ways of gambling. For example, with apps, you just put in money and then you're able to play these games, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And while it's marketed in a different way that's fun and engaging, it's still those same traditional ideas of gambling.
They are honestly struggling the most with new age drug addiction. I think there is a plethora of drugs out there today that are very, very easily available. The way that everything is online, everything is put out there online, and that just makes drugs so much more easily accessible and so much more easily promoted.
Access to high-risk behaviors has also become easier. Online gambling platforms, explicit content, and substances are more accessible than ever now. And it's also becoming more private and more hidden, so it's harder for adults to kind of see the warning signs that would prevent, this addiction.
So when we think about this particular theme, this is the accessible theme, the effects of accessibility. I'll never forget when I asked one of my clients, this was way before COVID, I asked her how she got her drugs, which is a standard question that I use in my drug and alcohol assessments. And she was like, duh, Snapchat. And I thought, okay, am I supposed to know what this means? And I was like, help me understand. And so she pulls out her phone, literally 2 clicks. And she says, okay, if I don't cancel this, he'll be here any minute. And I'm thinking, who will be here any minute? She said, oh, my drug dealer. And I'm like, wait, okay, hold on. How does he know where you are? And she said, oh, well, he geolocates me. And I thought, okay, wait, how does he know what you want? And she said, oh, he has my order. And so when I found out from the Children and Screens conference last summer, how many young people, it was an overabundance. A majority of young people are literally solicited on things like TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram by drug dealers, sex traffickers, any kind of people who are trolling, harassing kids on a daily basis. This gave me pause to think about giving technology, especially social media, to kids. So we want to try to delay and delay and delay. The Surgeon General really suggests that we delay smartphones until at least high school and social media until age 16. And these are really good reasons for it. The accessibility that we see, especially the younger it happens, the deleterious effects are compounded. And so when I went to that particular conference last year, I went back and looked at my notes and compiled a bullet list of all the things that the researchers said they were seeing in the research. The younger kids are exposed to screens, the problems that they have. The last one there kind of tickles me a little bit because a researcher said it wears out the pleasure center of their brain, leading to addiction. That literally is exposure to too much dopamine stimulating stimuli, we call that supernormal stimuli that literally creates new structure in the brain that predisposes kids to becoming addicted to other things even faster. So, of course, leading to all kinds of mood problems. And we think about what we're seeing out there with mood. I want you to see the numbers. If you read Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, he does such a beautiful job of putting these statistics out there online to show how this is really affecting our kids. Self-harm, self-injury, suicidal ideation, all of these things are going up, and it's having a pretty big effect on kids, but especially our girls. Now, the reasons for this, kids are not going out. I call it experience deficits. If you go out and you feel anxiety, which means you care, right? Anxiety is not fun to feel, but it just means that you care about how you perform or what you're going to do or how things are going to unfold for you. If you don't do that, you grow long networks of neurons for avoiding anxiety. If you go out into the world and you experience anxiety and you have fun anyway, or get through it in an awkward, weird way, you grow skills for that. But in our world where there's gamification and gambleification, we see that there's a lot more reasons to stay at home. We see that things like gambling has seen a resurgence of that. Anything out there that says this will increase your odds, remember that is a gambling term. And the rebound of gambling that has recently happened is really due to the 2018 reversal of the Supreme Court that made online betting, which had been illegal, now legal. So we see that so many more states now into the 30s have legalized online gambling. The effect is that addiction is up by 30%. This year alone, I've already met 2 kids. One was a teen and one was a young adult who already are thousands of dollars in debt to their online apps. Now, this is, I think, the most important part of this presentation. I asked the young people, okay, tell me the state of modern youth and what parents can do or maybe not do. Like what is helpful and what is hurtful. So Amanda, take this one away. and they are perfect the way they are. You guys missed the smile on Isaac's face when he said that. So what can parents do or not do? Here are the themes. And please know, all of these kids did their own videos. They didn't get together. These are themes that emerged from these interviews. What they all said is they want to see adults in their life model healthy tech use. They want to have a sense of belonging, eating together, family meals. They want to have their tech use be monitored, limits, and you heard the theme, education. They want to learn, what do these things do to the body, to the brain, and continue to openly communicate, which is really what Know Your Neuro is about, and what Operation Parent is about, is making sure that we help you facilitate those conversations. So the way that you can do that is to follow the brain balance rule, introducing this to your kids and being able to say, okay, if you had 2 hours of recreational tech time on Saturday, then you need to get off and go do something else with your brain. And following the activity pyramid can be very, very helpful with that, but making sure that you have those guidelines. Now, I wanted to kind of summarize by talking about that we have some good news in our country. When you look at the numbers for substance use, we see that it has been declining for a long time. And this is really amazing news that our kids are choosing to engage in less substance use. But is it really good news if they're replacing it with a different type of addiction that maybe is affecting them at younger ages? So when I finished that particular conference last year, I came home and I did these lists of what I heard the researchers say that the kids were learning. And it was disturbing that they're learning what they should want, that technology companies are telling them what they should look like, what they want them to buy, what they should consume, what drugs should be something that they aspire to try. They're learning unhealthy sexual scripts, how to access unhealthy high-risk behavior, how to gamble, cyberbully, how to be violent, that their identity is equal to the likes, that they should objectify other people, starve their body, and avoid things that increase anxiety or that are hard to do. What they're not learning is how to be intrinsically motivated to read, study, understand social cues, listen, communicate, how to cultivate purpose and meaning in life, and how to cope with tough emotions, how to balance on and off-screen activities, socialize, connect, how to ask for help, how to build tenacity and resilience. And so I had one video that really kind of summed this up. Amanda, will you play the 7th video? So I love that. It summarizes that our neurodevelopment is experience dependent, and these guys are growing up with technology at very, very early ages. So what can you do as parents? You probably heard it. Validate, validate, validate. There's a really great book called The Power of Validation, written by a couple of Houstonians. I really recommend that book. Refrain from comparing them to others, to siblings, to great. Every child is going to be different. They're already inundated with so much social comparison. Definitely don't need that at home. They want limits. They want boundaries. It's appropriate to be your child's frontal lobe until they grow one of their own. And so even when a child is 16, they've only got about 45% of their frontal lobe developed. That means we still have to pitch in 55% of the structure. So here are the national organizations that I highly recommend to combat and to help you get some resources for some of the things that the kids talked about today. Cultural Reframed, Know the Odds, National Problem Gambling Helpline, and Children and Screens. Really my favorite organizations for some of these issues. And of course, please check out knowyourneuro.org. But I'm also on the advisory board of smartfamilies.org here in Houston. And if you want a QR code, ironically pulling out your smartphones to do this, we help schools take the pledge to delay social media, and smartphones as long as possible. And we've created a really quick go-to norms and guidelines sheet that might be able to help you figure out, okay, what should the screen time guidelines, what should they be doing instead? What are the behaviors and milestones that kids need to grow? That's on the norms and guidelines. And please remember to start your kids on basic phones that don't have access to the internet. Really, kids don't need to have access to the internet on their phones until they're driving. And so please consider pledging to delay as long as possible. Okay, so now we want to open this up to questions. I know Michelle's coming. There you are. You want to take it over for me for here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we invite you. Now's the perfect time to put your question in the chat if you haven't done that already.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so this is where you can keep in touch with Dr. Collier. You already know what a fantastic speaker she is, but if you're interested in having her speak for your organization or at a national conference, you better book her quickly. While we were developing this webinar, she was on the road for several national conferences, and she is desired for these opportunities. And so you've heard a lot about Neuro Whereabouts Guide, and I would invite you to check out a copy of that. We have read that one, as well as the Audible. If you're an Audible listener, that's a great way to listen. And Dr. Collier is the voice on that. Her children's series is fantastic. We have featured several of those here on this webinar platform, and we'll continue to do so. I think, as you've heard today, we just can't get early enough with these prevention messages and having kiddos protect their brains.
And one last thing about Know Your Neuro. On the web page, we have a new feature. It's a sign-up feature. You can put your phone number in and get 6 conversations curated by me that get delivered straight to your phone via text. I say 6 conversations because remember, a kid's brain changes every 2 to 3 months, lots of new dendrites. And so they need to hear the message a lot, but we actually don't want to be repetitive, right? And so we want to use the different prevention holidays. And I've already curated those conversations. So please go to Know Your Neuro, sign up for my newsletter, and sign up to get those text messages sent directly to your phone.
Now is your opportunity to enter to win a copy of Your Moves Matter. You can see I've got a lot of sticky notes in here. We're so grateful for the young adults that gave us their perspective and just deep things to think about today. I think each of us can see our own children and the youth represented today, and the need to just move swiftly in protecting their brains and connecting with them.
Definitely. I just want to quickly say too that in the book you actually get to see a picture and read the bio of 19 of the interns. You saw a couple of them today that wrote some chapters in the book, but I'm just so proud of them and their work and their dedication to giving back to the community.
100%. And so if you want to hear more from these teens, you got to add this book to your library like we have. And 3 of you today are going to receive a copy of Dr. Collier's book.
Make sure you guys check out the parent handbooks from Operation Parent. These are really updated on a very regular basis. So you're going to see really good information when you need it. Like for instance, loot boxes and the introduction to the gambling section. It's so important that you guys get this information out. What I love too about the parent handbooks is that they're concise. So you get the conversations and the data in an easy to understand way. So please check out those as well.
As Dr. Collier and the young adults have taught us today, the hardest parenting conversations don't come from a script, right? That's why we created the handbooks that Dr. Collier was referencing. Each handbook is packed with real information, the real things that we as parents are facing. They're written for every kind of trusted adult, caregiver, parents, grandparents, foster parents can all benefit from these handbooks. There's conversation starters, clear action steps, and as Dr. Collier mentioned, they are very up to date. Today's a great day. This whole year is great. We're celebrating 20 years of serving families. We're offering a special anniversary discounted bundle for just $20. So you can get an elementary and a middle and high parent handbook in one of our versions, standard, Spanish, and Christian. Bundles are limited to up to 5 per person, but we encourage you to grab those for trusted adults in your life. The more adults are equipped, the more kids are supported. And we heard today how much young adults are creating that connection and support and accurate information. Today, we can't delay our prevention, and we want to keep these conversations going. So follow us on social media at Operation Parent for tips, facts, and conversation starters on the daily. Be sure to register for our upcoming webinars as well, and you can use the pop-up for the quick up registration. And now, one of the most favorite parts of the day, questions for Dr. Collier. So I've got several of those queued up, and there's a bunch more that have come in. So we'll get to as many as we can today.
Fantastic. Okay.
Here we go. What happens when your child, so this parent has a son turning 18 in a week, and their life has been taken over by a Snapchat addiction. And it came on quite quickly. So what would be some of your recommendations for the overuse of social media?
This is a fantastic question. And a lot of times parents will delay. And then, as you know, you lose a lot of leverage once they graduate and they launch into college, or they are an adult and they use that as a manipulation to say, you can't have any say in my life anymore. This is when the relationship really matters. And to be able to go to that young person and say, I'm concerned, I'm worried, I don't want to be intrusive, but do you need help? Because I know you still have a whole 5th of brain development to go. And one of those higher level skills is impulse control. And if you're finding it hard to control your impulses, I can help. We can put a timer on your phone and help you shut that off. But also to ask questions like, how do you think the increase in time is affecting you? What do you think it's doing to your sleep? Do you see that it's having a negative or a positive effect on your peer relationships, on your friendships? Make sure that you ask open-ended questions. Please think about the Socratic method. You know, you want to really channel Socrates here and be very open-ended. What do you think? Is this affecting? Making sure that you don't judge and push them away. So keep the conversation open and just offer, hey, if you want me to help, I'll help. Good question.
That's awesome. The sleep thing does really concern me, and it impacts so many areas of their life, so many impacts of their health. Do you believe in the apps that keep tabs on children and their smartphones?
Oh, definitely. And I believe in timer apps that'll just shut it off. You know, like if you say, okay, I want to be on here for 30 minutes, and then it just shuts it off automatically. Many kids don't have the ability to do that. Years ago, I made this rule for myself. If I start feeling yucky about myself, I'm getting off of social media. Literally, you guys, it takes me 2 minutes and I start to wonder what's wrong with me and why I didn't get invited to something. And I am a 55-year-old adult who is regressing into this really scared middle school aged kid who's wondering why I didn't get invited to something. And so I shut it off after like 2 minutes, but hopefully I have a fully, developed frontal lobe that can help me do that. And when kids don't, I think it's appropriate to ask them for help. And I can see that it says, one of the comments, it's sad to see trusted adults, caregivers, grandparents always on their phones. And I think this is up to other adults to say, hey, let's all put our phones down. Let's have this birthday party phone free. Putting on invitations, when you send out party invitations, this is going to be a phone free event. We're going to collect phones at the door and give your kids their phones back. You heard the young people. They said, we want to see you guys modeling this for us. But these things are extremely addictive. And if we don't have the frontal lobe capacity to get off, how are they?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way to model having timers on our own phones too. And a block during dinner time. Like what we just did a local event a couple weeks ago, and we interviewed the teens at the event what they wanted the dinner time to look like. And then we interviewed the parents as well. And both were saying no phones at dinner, like make it a more special time.
Yes. Definitely. There are schools now that are using apps that dampen signals. Like as soon as kids come in, they're just not having a signal. And I've heard that those companies are also marketing to families. And so there's so many really great apps that just shut off the phone. And of course, delaying social media. So there was a question, what is considered social media in the research? I know it's more than just the popular sites, Facebook, Insta, Snap. What about the out-of-the-box platforms that are also known as social media? What I've seen in the literature is that companies will do kind of focus on one or kind of social media in general, or ask the kids, what are you on? And just how many hours are you spending on these particular apps?
This sounds like a question from a school asking, what do you suggest for a parent outreach event with a focus on youth cell phone use? And what are your go-to materials that you think parents should receive?
Oh, sure. So at Smart Families, we actually help schools build community. So please reach out to Smart Families and sign your school up for the services that we offer. But one of the things that we do is we do a family code building event. We have kids of all ages come. One of the best things you can do is to find babysitters for the littles, and to have your local restaurants kind of donate food, and then build a community by sitting around and prompting questions. So when I do a family code building event, we have the kids drawing pictures of their families, and this is really appropriate for kids as young as 6, 7, 8. So we talk about our family values. We create those together, and then we make a list of the no's in our family. And a lot of times parents are so afraid to talk to their kids about risky behavior because they don't want to expose them or ruin their innocence. It's so important to remember, though, it is really critical that kids learn about these things from you and not from billboards, from social media, from a platform at somebody's house when they happen to go over there. They've got to be prepared earlier and earlier and earlier. And so in the conversations that you have, you're going to say, hey, have you ever heard about cigarettes? Hey, have you ever heard about vaping? Hey, do you know what social media is? If they say no, the conversation's over. In the next 3 months or the next year, you repeat the conversation until you know that they've been exposed. And then you can start saying, okay, well, let's talk about how to say no to this and what your refusal skills are and how these affect your brain. And so make sure that you keep those conversations consistent, at least 6 conversations per year, 10 minutes apiece, starting by the age of around 7. And you decide whether your child is mature enough to handle some of those conversations.
If there is a family on the call that would like to dial back their social media use, what are some withdrawal symptoms from technology that a parent could anticipate?
Sure. So we kind of affectionately call those techno tantrums. I don't like that term because it makes it sound like a funny thing. And if you've seen a kid having a techno tantrum or an adult, it's not pretty. It literally is withdrawals. It's withdrawal symptoms. You might warn your family to say you might feel irritable, you may feel uncomfortable, you may not be able to sit still. As your brain starts to calm down from having a barrage of digital stimuli. Remember, fast moving supernormal stimuli that's really colorful spikes dopamine levels. And so if we're used to getting this steady drip of tiny dopamine increases from multiple screens or really active games, the brain is going to have to calm down. And then the body has to be able to cope with the withdrawal from that. And so to remember that it may take a little bit for everybody to calm down and get used to not being able to go for their phone or their screen, to feel the discomfort of the silence or just the discomfort in being around humans. And so it's a really good question. And to learn how to cope with those things is, I think, the task of modern families.
There are such good questions in the queue. Kind of related, how do you go backwards? If you've already allowed, which is all of us, allowed too much time on electronics or social media, what's the good way to back up and start setting some limits?
I think that to remember that one of the best things you can say to your child is, I'm sorry, I made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I gave you this because I thought it was okay because everyone had it. But now there is new research to show that it's really dangerous to your brain's development. So many schools are going back to their curricula organizations that they buy software through and say, we don't want to use these apps for learning anymore. We want to go back to books. But these companies are saying, well, we don't make those anymore. It's really terrifying because we now know that gamified learning software can decrease learning and reduce test scores. So schools are really trying to go backward. So being able to say to kids, I made a mistake. We've got to dial this back. And let's look at the healthy guidelines for screen use. We're going to follow these now. And you may be upset with us, but it's our job to be your frontal lobe until it grows. And it's our job to protect your frontal lobe, especially if you can't.
Do you have some recommendations for loneliness, for the loneliness epidemic, specifically for males?
Sure. Well, that's so interesting that you say that. I just sent out an email today to a lot of my male clients who I'm going to offer a group to, and I got a huge response back. There's a study that just came out that said a large majority of adult males in the world right now are suffering with depression because they don't have friends. And so there's also a really great prevention model out of Iceland that used friendship groups starting at kindergarten. They did a really cool thing with asking parents to bring kids to friendship group activities. And then they randomly selected kids to be in different groups of 4 every different month. And it really helped cultivate friendships from kindergarten all the way up. So I know it's like hard to plan a high school play date for your 16-year-old, but it is important to say you have to be in at least one pro-social every semester. That means summer, fall, and spring. And if you don't choose it, then I'll choose it. You have to be in one pro-social. That could be a club, a team sport, or it could be like going to the gym for classes or learning a new skill. But to make sure that you make it a requirement that they are around other humans and learn good social skills, because it's good for their mental health. Mm-hmm. Now, if they fight and scream and get upset about that, yes, that is the hardest thing to deal with. But to make sure that you just say, look, this is a requirement. As your parent, I got to help you raise a healthy brain.
And community can really fend off that anxiety and depression. Oh, I love that. So did you hear in your interviews any of the youth mention they wish they hadn't gotten a phone as early as they did?
I've heard that from, I cannot tell you how many countless kids that I have spoken to and parents who've said that too over the 3.5 years that I've been doing presentations on behalf of smart families, because all we do is we teach families the neuroscience of screens and how to create healthy guidelines and increase motivation. So I have seen so many, and the interns too are vocal about that. They wish that they had delayed, or they're learning how to leave the phone at home or to shut it off. And they feel so much more calm and centered when they do, but their brain, the addicted part of the brain, still wants it. So I think it's important for parents to remember that just because kids want it and doesn't mean they're going to die if they don't have it. A lot of parents think that they're going to socially impair their children if children don't have social media. But I've seen so many kids learn leadership skills, communication skills. One of my clients, she went into a group of girls and said, hey, you guys know I don't have a phone yet, so everybody get off their phone. And everybody did. And so it really helped her develop leadership skills.
Yeah,
it's important that kids get out and use those communication and listening skills.
Yeah, I know. I fell in the trap of thinking right at the transition to middle school that my girls needed a phone. And what happened right after that, because they were staying after for practices and things like that, is then what happened is they go into their rooms with the phone. We had to adjust for that, but it's like you think it's the right thing to do, but there's another consequence that happens right after that. They go to their rooms with those phones, and that's not something you want.
No,
I didn't like that at all.
It is. It's important to think about the bedroom as where you want a child to learn good sleep hygiene. So bedrooms should be tech-free. They should be device-free. I'm a person who has all my devices in my bedroom, and how the negative effect that it has on my sleep and my patterns. And so I try really hard. As soon as I walk into my bedroom, I go put my phone on the charger, and then I don't listen to it until the alarm wakes me up in the morning. But what we need to be able to do is to get digital alarm clocks for kids that actually plug into the wall, so that they can learn how to get up and wake up without technology right there. It's so interesting. I hear from kids who, when they follow the family rule and put the cell phone in the basket in their parents' room, they sleep better, they perform better at school, but yet they still say, I still want my phone. That is a developing brain who has 50% of their impulse control, but yet a fully formed limbic system that wants what it wants when it wants it. So to remember, the accelerator, the limbic system, is fully developed by 12, but yet the brake, where we have impulse control, is not fully developed by 25. So we have that window of time where we have to intervene. And somebody asked a question in the chat, like, how can I get my kid motivated to do something? Well, you can't. Intrinsic motivation is defined by that human, but you can require that they do their job, like go to school or do the chores in the home or be a fully participating kid. A researcher that I saw many years ago who wrote a book called Duct Tape Therapy, she used to say that you can require kids to be RRF, respectful, responsible, and fun to be with. So, we don't have to be fun to be with all the time, but when we are in relationship with someone, we want to take full responsibility for how we show up. We want to be reciprocal. We want to be kind. We want to try to be a presence that is fun to be with. But those are social skills. Being respectful and responsible, those are things that we should require kids to ascribe to and learn how to do. And when they don't, to deliver the appropriate consequences at home for that behavior. But give them lots of opportunities to learn and grow those skills.
Yeah, help them learn it. They'll use that so much later in life for everything.
Yes.
So we heard you loud and clear to delay phones as long as possible, but we also know some families may need it. And so what is your recommendation on a phone for a little when they need to be in touch?
So I really recommend no watches that unless you turn it off during the day. So if you get your little smart watch, no internet access, and delay internet access as long as you possibly can. Using basic phones is a great training wheel for kids, but turn it off during the day for learning. Because remember, every notification, every digital distraction causes kids to lose up to 9 minutes of learning. So if you give it, shut it off. Make sure you tell grandparents no tablets, no tablets.
Mm-hmm.
A colleague of mine saw that her kid was having lots of anxiety, took away the tablet, and the anxiety went away because that kiddo, about 4 years old, was way too young to be given this kind of digital stimuli. The brain and the eyes can't handle that constant stream of fast-moving stimuli. So to delay it, and to shut it off during learning time, to shut it off during bedtime. This does make a lot more work for parents. So if you just consider shutting everything off, it's a lot less work for you. And your kid gets to grow up having lots of face-to-face, eye contact, family time with you.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Collier, this has been so much fun. Thank you for joining us again. One of the positive comments in our question section was they loved how much the young adults and you helped us focus on self-esteem. So on that note, I think we'll wrap this up and then we'll see you again soon. Thank you everyone for joining us today and giving us your most precious time, your most precious thing, your time this afternoon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dr. Collier.